In a quiet corner of a quaint European village nestled between soft green hills and sleepy cobblestone alleys, there stood a little clock shop on Étoile Street. The sign above the door was old but elegant, etched in swirling gold letters that read, "Monsieur Bellamy, Clocks of All Time." The shop had a crooked red roof, ivy crawling up its stone walls, and tiny bell chimes that jingled sweetly whenever someone entered. Inside, it always smelled of old wood, brass polish, and the faintest whisper of lavender. Every wall was covered in clocks, some tall and proud with pendulums that swayed in slow rhythm. Others were small and delicate, carved with flowers or birds, ticking gently like the heartbeat of the shop itself. Monsieur Bellamy was the clockmaker. He was an elderly gentleman with white, cloud-like hair, round glasses perched on his nose, and a soft voice that never rose above a whisper. He wore waistcoats in muted shades of brown and green, always with a tiny magnifying glass hanging from a ribbon around his neck. Bellamy didn't speak much, but he had the kindest eyes and always hummed softly while he worked. Each morning, he would unlock the shop, dust every clock, wind them all carefully, and greet them as though they were old friends. "Good morning, Madame Cuckoo," he would say to a chattering wooden cuckoo clock. "Bonjour, old Baroque bell." He'd nod to a tall grandfather clock in the corner. But the village children were most fascinated by the back room, a place no one had ever seen. Rumor had it that behind the curtain at the end of the shop was a special clock, a magical one, unlike anything else in the world. Some said it could turn back time. Others claimed it showed the dreams of people instead of the hours. But Monsieur Bellamy never said a word about it. One rainy afternoon, just as the church bells began to chime 4 o'clock, a little girl named Elodie came into the shop. She was no taller than the counter, wore a yellow raincoat that made tiny puddles on the floor, and held a small, broken watch in her hand. "It was my grandpapa's," she said shyly, offering it to Bellamy. "He used to tell me stories about how it helped him find lost memories." Bellamy looked at the watch through his magnifying lens. It was an old pocket watch with faded numbers and a cracked glass face. He turned it over carefully, his fingers trembling just a little. Then he smiled softly and said, "Ah, timekeeper of the heart. These are rare." He took the watch to his workbench, which was cluttered with gears, springs, tiny tools, and velvet cloths. Elodie sat quietly on a little stool by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass as Bellamy worked in peaceful silence. Outside, the storm rolled gently over the hills, the sky a pale shade of lavender and gray. Inside, the clocks ticked in harmony, each one a gentle echo in the soft, golden light. After a long while, Bellamy closed the back of the watch and polished it gently. "There," he said, handing it back. "He'll still be with you. Not just in time, but in every tick." Elodie looked up at him with wide eyes. "Do you believe clocks can hold memories?" Bellamy leaned back, his hands resting on the edge of the table. "Not clocks," he said. "But time remembers everything. Clocks just listen very, very well." Just then, a soft chime came from behind the velvet curtain at the back of the shop. It was different from the others, low, melodic, almost like a lullaby. Elodie turned her head. Is that the special clock? Bellamy looked at the curtain and smiled faintly. Would you like to see? She nodded quickly, heart thudding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The old man stood and pulled the curtain aside, revealing a small doorway that led to a round room lit by a single hanging lamp. The room smelled of cedarwood and jasmine, and in the center stood a tall clock unlike any other. It was carved from pale, pearlescent wood that shimmered faintly like moonlight. Instead of numbers, the face was etched with symbols, stars, moons, waves, leaves, and tiny keys. This, said Bellamy, is the memory clock. Elodie approached it slowly. What does it do? It listens to your heart, Bellamy whispered. And when you place your hand on it, it lets you walk through time, not forward or backward, but within. She reached out and gently touched the clock's face. It was warm, like sunlit stone, and as her fingers brushed the surface, the room dimmed, and the soft ticking grew louder. Suddenly, Elodie found herself standing in a field of wild lavender, with butterflies drifting lazily in the sun. The air was warm and smelled of her grandfather's cologne. In the distance, she saw a figure sitting on a bench beneath a tree. It was him, her grandpapa. He looked just as she remembered, kind eyes, soft smile, and a journal on his lap. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He smiled at her, and she ran to sit beside him, feeling the gentle hum of time wrapping around them like a blanket. He opened the journal and showed her sketches, of her as a baby, of his garden, of the little watch she now held. And then, as gently as a whisper, the scene began to fade. Elodie opened her eyes and was back in the shop. Bellamy stood nearby, watching with a serene expression. Time, he said softly, is the longest story. But sometimes, just one page is enough. She hugged the watch close and whispered, Thank you. He nodded and returned to his bench, already winding another clock, already humming another tune. That night, Elodie slept deeply, the little watch ticking gently beside her bed. In her dreams, she wandered fields of lavender under a twilight sky, holding her grandfather's hand, listening to the quiet song of time. And far away, on Étoile Street, Monsieur Bellamy wound his clocks and whispered to them in the language only clocks understand, the language of memory, patience, and the soft magic of sleep. It had been several weeks since Elodie's visit to Monsieur Bellamy's shop. Since that day, she carried her grandfather's watch with her wherever she went. Sometimes she would hold it close when she sat beneath the old cherry tree near the school, listening to the wind rustling the blossoms like the soft hush of time itself. The memory clock had opened something in her, not a door exactly, but a window. Now, she often found herself noticing little things, the rhythm of falling rain, the way dust floated in sunlight, how birds always flew in quiet spirals before dusk. Everything felt slower, softer. One warm evening, as golden light spilled across the village rooftops, Elodie walked down Étoile Street once more. She wasn't sure why. She simply felt pulled, like a thread was gently tugging her toward the clock shop. The sign still creaked above the door. Monsieur Bellamy, clocks of all time. Inside, The air was thick with comfort, beeswax polish, pinewood shelves, a distant trace of cinnamon and old pages. Bellamy sat behind the counter, carefully oiling the gears of a delicate silver carriage clock. He looked up as she entered, smiling without surprise, as if he'd been expecting her. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," he said gently, setting his tools aside. "I was wondering," she began, hesitant, "if the memory clock could show other things. Not just people we've lost, but places, feelings, moments." Bellamy nodded slowly, his eyes glinting behind his glasses. "It can. But memories are like rivers. They do not always flow the way we wish." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He gestured for her to follow. This time, instead of the back room, he led her down a narrow staircase behind a hidden panel in the bookshelf. The steps creaked softly underfoot, like they too remembered every visitor who had passed. At the bottom was a quiet, round chamber filled with sand-colored light. There were no clocks here, only hourglasses. Hundreds of them. Tall ones, tiny ones, hourglasses filled with blue sand, golden dust, silver flakes, even what looked like tiny glowing embers. Each sat quietly on wooden pedestals, not moving, as though time were holding its breath. "These," Bellamy whispered, "are sandglasses of emotion. Each holds a single feeling from someone, somewhere, at some point in time. Not memories exactly, but the atmosphere of a moment." Elodie stepped closer to a slender glass filled with lilac-colored sand that shimmered faintly. "What feeling is this one?" she asked. Bellamy leaned in, studying the base. A tiny copper plaque read, "Marseille, 1902, the first time she danced in the rain." He smiled. "Joyful surrender." She looked around the room in awe. There was one labeled, "Naples, 1877, the last quiet tea before saying goodbye," and another, "Paris, 1951, a letter never sent." "Can you feel them?" Elodie whispered. Bellamy nodded. "If you turn one over and watch it fall, the emotion comes back into the room, like a scent or a song. But only for a minute." Elodie reached for a tiny hourglass no taller than her thumb. The sand inside was a soft, pale blue. "Unknown date. A child's first sleep without a night light." She turned it over. At first, nothing happened. Then, the room grew hushed. The light dimmed gently. A sense of courage mixed with fear filled the air, like the feeling of holding your breath and taking your first step into darkness. It was quiet and brave and a little sad, but peaceful too. The moment faded as the last grain fell. Bellamy placed the glass back on its pedestal. "Every emotion matters," he said. "Even the quiet ones." Elodie was silent for a while. Then she asked, "Do you have one of my grandpapa?" Bellamy motioned to a shelf higher up, where a single, almost invisible hourglass rested. Inside, the sand was soft lavender gray. He brought it down and handed it to her. The plaque read, "Midsummer evening, reading a bedtime story beneath the olive tree." Her eyes filled with tears. "He read me that story every year." Bellamy placed a hand on her shoulder, warm and steady. Then it's yours to keep. Back in her room that night, Elodie placed the tiny hourglass on her windowsill beside the ticking watch. She didn't turn it over. Not yet. Instead, she watched the stars blink above the rooftops, listening to the distant hum of the village, the deep, sleepy chimes of the bell tower, and her own gentle breath, floating like time. Somewhere beneath Étoile Street, the sandglasses waited, full of feelings, untold stories, and the quiet comfort of knowing that every moment, no matter how small, lives on. The days drifted gently onward in the village of Belmont. Lavender bloomed in little window pots. Bicycles rattled softly over cobblestone streets. Even the bells of the chapel seemed to chime more slowly, as if they too had been enchanted by the hush of summer. Elodie had made it a ritual now. Every evening before bed, she would wind her grandfather's pocket watch and listen to its steady ticking. She'd sit at the window with a cup of warm milk and glance now and then at the tiny lavender hourglass, still unturned, still filled with that quiet midsummer memory. Some nights she thought about turning it. But some things, the softest things, are more powerful when they wait. One evening, just as twilight melted into indigo, she wandered again to Monsieur Bellamy's shop. She didn't knock this time. The door creaked open on its own, as if welcoming her back. Bellamy was tuning an antique music box near the window. The box was in the shape of a carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, each with golden bridles and eyes full of stories. "Bonsoir," he said, not looking up. "You're just in time." "For what?" she asked. He smiled and set down his tuning fork. "For the waltz." He led her to the back of the shop, not the staircase to the hourglasses, but another narrow corridor filled with long, wooden cabinets. Inside each, carefully restored wind-up toys, ballerinas in faded silk, tin monkeys with cymbals, even a small automaton of a boy holding a letter. But at the center of the room stood something far more beautiful. A grand music box table, carved from cherrywood, inlaid with delicate brass stars. Upon it were 6 tiny dancers, not dolls, but clockwork figurines dressed in shimmering miniature gowns and coats. "Is it a toy?" Elodie asked. "No," said Bellamy. "It's a waltz clock." She looked closer. Each figurine had a name carved beneath them on a silver plate. Juliet, Henri, Lisette, Claude, Mireille, Gaston. "They're people?" she whispered. "They were," Bellamy replied softly. "Each one once belonged to someone who brought them here. The clock remembers how they moved, how they danced." He turned a brass key on the side. The box hummed. Soft, delicate notes began to play, not loud, but silvery, like a lullaby echoing across a quiet ballroom. And the dancers moved. Not like toys. No, they swayed with the grace of memory. Slowly, gently, as if twirling not just to the music, but to emotions long past. Juliet twirled with a wistful sweep. Henri bowed with a playful flick of his coat. Gaston danced alone, but joyfully, his tiny eyes catching the imaginary light. Elodie watched in silence, her heart catching in her throat. "The waltz clock doesn't keep time," Bellamy said. "It keeps feeling. Each movement is a stitch in someone's story." "Did they leave them here?" she asked. "Some did," he replied. "Some had no one else to give them to. Some wanted their memories to dance forever." The music faded. The dancers slowed. One by one, they paused mid-step, not frozen, but resting. Sleeping. Bellamy turned to her. "Would you like to make one?" Elodie blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "Only if you choose a moment that deserves to be remembered." She thought long and quiet. Then she whispered, "There was a summer. I was 6. My grandpapa and I made lemonade from the tree in his yard. I wore a crown of daisies. We danced barefoot in the garden." Bellamy smiled. "That is a very good moment." He led her to a small workbench where a plain wooden figurine stood. He handed her a brush, paints, and a handful of golden thread. "It takes time," he said gently, "but the good things always do." For the next few evenings, Elodie returned. Each night, she painted and carved, listening to the ticking of old clocks and the soft breathing of a world that never rushed her. When the figurine was done, dressed in tiny daisies and bare feet, she placed it carefully upon the waltz clock. Bellamy turned the key. The music began again, and her dancer moved, swaying in a circle, hands lifted, twirling slowly as if the garden wind were blowing through her hair. And just like that, Elodie's moment, her sunlight lemonade joy, had been captured. Timeless, gentle, real. That night she returned home and, for the first time, turned over the lavender hourglass. The memory of her grandfather reading beneath the olive tree came like a warm breeze. Time didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt soft, full of love. And from far away, deep beneath Étoile Street, tiny feet twirled in a wooden waltz, remembering all the good that once was, and always would be. In the quiet mornings of Belmont, when dew still clung to the lavender and the birds had not quite found their songs, Elodie began to notice something curious. Every time she stepped inside Monsieur Bellamy's shop, the clocks sounded different. Not just in pitch or chime, but in mood. Some days they ticked with a crisp cheer, like laughter on a spring morning. Other days, the ticking was slow and thoughtful, as if the walls themselves were remembering something solemn. The clocks, she realized, didn't just tell time, they responded to it. "Clocks are like people," Bellamy once said. "The longer they run, the more they feel." One such day, with a misty sky hanging low over the village rooftops, Bellamy handed Elodie a key, not brass like the others, but pale silver, with a swirl of blue enamel at the top. "It's time you saw the library," he said. She followed him down a hallway behind the staircase, one she hadn't noticed before. The wooden floor creaked gently beneath her feet. At the end was a small door. She placed the key into the lock and turned. The door opened into a room that hummed with stillness. The scent of polished wood and old paper drifted through the air like a lullaby. Soft lamps glowed with golden light, and the walls were lined with shelves, not of books, but of scrolls. Hundreds of them. each one tied with ribbon and tagged with delicate handwriting. Bellamy stepped in behind her. "These," he said, "are time scrolls." Elodie gently picked one from a shelf and untied the ribbon. Inside was not just writing, but sketches. A girl dancing with a kite. A boy skipping stones by a lake. A grandmother's hands weaving lavender into a wreath. "Their memories?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. Preserved, stored, shared. People come here when a moment feels too big to hold in the heart alone." She noticed a scroll tucked high on a shelf, tied with a ribbon of violet silk. Bellamy smiled and reached for it. "My first waltz," he said quietly, "with my mother. In a candlelit room with a gramophone playing Debussy." He untied it. Inside, a drawing of a small boy with wide eyes and a woman in a soft dress, their feet barely touching the floor as they spun. The moment was still alive, not just remembered but kept. Elodie asked, "Can I make one?" Bellamy handed her a blank scroll and a fountain pen. "Take your time." And she did. She returned every afternoon, sitting quietly at a corner table, the ticking of clocks above blending with the hush of memory. She drew slowly, carefully, her grandfather's hands slicing lemons, her feet dancing in summer dust, the way the daisy crown itched slightly on her forehead. Each line was like breathing, gentle, full, and calm. When she finished, she tied it with a ribbon of pale yellow and placed it beside others. Now, part of her would stay. A whisper in the library, a thread in the quilt of shared time. One day, Bellamy said, "There are some who believe that when enough scrolls are written, time itself begins to dream." She laughed softly. "Dream of what?" "Of us," he replied. "Of everything we loved." That evening, Elodie passed the chapel as its bell tolled once, quietly. The clouds had cleared, and stars peeked out one by one like old friends. She wound her grandfather's watch as always, placed the lavender hourglass beside her bed, and lay down, the memory of the waltz and the whispering library blooming softly behind her eyes. And somewhere, deep in the workshop, a silver key clicked quietly into place, and another scroll waited to be written. It had been many days since Elodie first stepped into Monsieur Bellamy's curious shop, and each visit now felt like a ritual, as comforting as the warmth of tea on a rainy morning or the hush of snow falling over rooftops. One pale spring afternoon, as the scent of lilacs drifted in from the village square, Bellamy greeted her with a new glimmer in his eyes. "Today," he said with quiet delight, "we will tend the garden." Elodie blinked. "The garden? But there's no garden." Bellamy smiled. "Not one you've seen yet." He guided her through a back hallway she hadn't noticed before, past cupboards full of winding keys and drawers that hummed faintly with ticking hearts. At the end of the hall stood an archway of ivy, living ivy, somehow growing indoors, its leaves soft and cool to the touch. Through it lay a hidden courtyard, completely encased by the walls of the clock shop. It was quiet, but not still. Petals fluttered gently in a breeze she could not feel. The trees here bore silver fruit. Lavender bloomed in every corner, and in the very center stood a tree made of polished copper, its branches filled with tiny hanging clocks, all ticking, all at different times. "The watchmaker's garden," Bellamy said. Elodie stepped forward slowly, gazing upward at the copper tree. "It's beautiful." Bellamy nodded. "Each clock belongs to someone. A heart it once matched. When a person has lived long enough and loved enough, the clock finds its way here." She noticed one clock shaped like a seashell, another shaped like a teacup. One had numbers in braille. One had no hands at all, just a soft light inside that pulsed like a quiet breath. "Do they stop?" Bellamy shook his head. "No. Time does not stop. It shifts, rests, becomes something else. In this garden, it becomes memory." They walked together among the clocks. Some chimed softly, like lullabies. Others whispered, just barely, names, or songs, or the rustling of pages. Beneath a blooming almond tree, Elodie spotted a smaller copper branch that had only one clock, its face blank. Bellamy said nothing, but offered her a silver brush and a pot of golden ink. Without asking why, Elodie began to paint. She painted a spiral sun, and beneath it a house with blue shutters, a girl dancing with lavender in her hands, a warm smile, a quiet ticking, all the little pieces of her heart. As she worked, the clock began to tick, not loudly, not urgently, just gently, as if content to be part of something lasting. Bellamy placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now you've planted something here, too." They sat in the grass as the sun dipped lower, though no real sun shone above, only the soft, golden glow of the copper tree. That night, Elodie dreamed of the garden, not as it was, but as it could be. More clocks, more stories, more branches reaching outward like open arms. She heard laughter, the turning of pages, and the soft chime of memory being cherished. And when she awoke, the lavender hourglass by her bed shimmered faintly, as if even time itself had shared in her dream. The days grew a little longer in the quiet town of Bellevue, where the shadows grew softer and the flowers bloomed just a moment sooner than elsewhere. Elodie now walked to the clock shop without thinking. Her feet knew the way, guided by a gentle rhythm that lived somewhere between her heartbeat and the ticking of Monsieur Bellamy's timepieces. One afternoon, she stepped into the shop and found Bellamy not at the counter, but seated on the wooden floor, eyes closed. Around him lay dozens of tiny brass music boxes, each no larger than a plum, their lids open like sleeping petals. He opened one eye and smiled. "I was waiting for you." Elodie sat down beside him on the floor, where the late sunlight slanted in through the old windows. The air was thick with quiet, a kind of silence that held something just below the surface, like a held breath. Bellamy handed her a small music box. "Do you hear it?" She placed it close to her ear. There was no melody at first, only the gentle mechanical flutter of gears. But then something emerged. A note. Then another. As if the music wasn't stored inside it, but slowly remembered. "It's playing my lullaby," she whispered. Bellamy nodded. "The walls remember. The clocks listen. The shop, it gathers the melodies people carry with them. And sometimes they find their way into these boxes. She opened a second one. A man's laughter. A violin tuning. Then a clumsy, sweet waltz. Another box. A lullaby sung in a language she did not know, but somehow understood. Another, the sound of the sea, followed by a mother's hum. Elodie reached for a plain wooden box with no markings. Inside, there was no sound at all. It felt like a pause, a space where a melody should be. She looked to Bellamy, puzzled. "Some songs," he said softly, "are still waiting to be sung." They sat in silence for a while, surrounded by open boxes playing half-remembered tunes. The music wound its way into the shop's beams and floorboards. It was not loud. It was not perfect. But it was comforting, like tea that's cooled just right, or a cat curled up at your feet. Elodie closed her eyes and imagined each tune as a thread, slowly weaving into a great invisible quilt. A blanket of songs and memories. One that could warm the coldest evening or soothe a restless heart. When she opened her eyes again, dusk had fallen. The clocks all ticked in a kind of harmony, like a great orchestra keeping perfect time. Bellamy stood and offered her a candle. "Take this one home. When you light it, the melody that belongs to you will come back, softly, slowly. And it will always guide you here." She took the candle, its wax smelling faintly of lavender and orange peel. As she stepped outside into the twilight, she realized the entire town had its own soft song. The creak of bicycles, the laughter of children echoing down stone alleys, the hush of distant bells. And beneath it all, the slow, reassuring tick of a clock shop that remembered more than just time. That night, as she lit the candle by her bed, a tune came to her, simple, tender, familiar. And she fell asleep with the faintest smile, wrapped in the music of the walls. The candlelight flickered low in Elodie's room, casting long, slow-moving shadows across her wooden floor. Outside, the stars gathered like patient watchers in the indigo sky. As if the universe itself paused to listen to the soft lullaby that had been stirred from the music box in the clockmaker's shop. Sleep that night came easy. But the dreams, oh, the dreams were tender. She wandered through a glowing corridor made entirely of gears and velvet. Clocks hung like lanterns, each tick sounding not like a tick at all, but a raindrop, a heartbeat, a distant whisper. She wasn't afraid. There was no hurry, no sharp edges. Time in this place was not strict or stern, it was kind. The next morning, Elodie returned to the shop. The bell above the door jingled in the same quiet rhythm, as if it too were waiting. Bellamy was seated at the rear workbench, polishing the smooth glass face of an hourglass with bristles so fine they could barely be seen. The hourglass shimmered with golden sand that moved unnaturally, falling upward, then stopping midair, then slowly drifting down again. He didn't look up. "You saw the corridor, didn't you?" he said, still polishing. Elodie blinked. "How did you know?" He smiled faintly. "It's a sign. The shop trusts you." She stepped closer. "What is that?" Bellamy turned the hourglass slightly so it caught the light just right. "This is the gentle hourglass. It doesn't measure time. It listens to it. The sand inside is not really sand, but memory dust. Every grain belongs to a moment someone once loved. He paused and then added, and some are moments they forgot they loved. Elodie peered into the hourglass. Inside the golden drift, she thought she saw glimpses, a pair of bare feet running through summer grass, a scarf fluttering in the wind, a kiss on a rainy afternoon. Tiny, flickering fragments, impossible to name but impossible to ignore. Bellamy handed it to her carefully. If you carry this with you and listen closely, it will guide you to the memories you need most. But why me? He looked at her with eyes that held years, and yet no weight. Because you wonder? And the shop responds to those who wonder, not those who rush. That day, Elodie took the hourglass through the quiet streets of Bellevue. At first, nothing happened. But then, as she passed the fountain near the square, a place she'd walked by 100 times, the hourglass began to hum, faintly, and the sand twirled upward. She stopped and sat by the fountain, watching. A memory stirred. She had been very small. Her mother had held her hand tightly as they threw coins into the water. Wish carefully, her mother had said, and kindly. She had forgotten. Until now. The memory wrapped itself around her like a soft shawl. Not bittersweet, just gentle. As if it had been waiting for years, like an old friend smiling from across the room. From that day on, Elodie carried the gentle hourglass with her. Not to chase lost time, but to notice the pieces that had quietly waited for her to return. Back in the clock shop, Bellamy continued his quiet work. The clocks ticked. The music boxes breathed. And deep in the walls, the melody of the town played on, waiting, always, for another dreamer to listen. The next evening came like a gentle sigh. The cobblestone streets of Bellevue glowed softly beneath gas lanterns, and the scent of lavender and rose petals drifted lazily through the air. Elodie, still holding the gentle hourglass close to her chest, returned to the clock shop just as twilight settled its violet shawl over the rooftops. Bellamy, as always, was at his bench, though this time he wasn't alone. A small wooden door at the back of the shop, which Elodie had never noticed before, stood ajar. From within spilled the golden hush of lamplight, and the scent of warm soil and jasmine. "The garden is awake," Bellamy said simply. "The clock shop has a garden?" Elodie asked, surprised. He nodded. "But not an ordinary one. This garden only blooms for those carrying time in their hearts. Come, it's time." With the hourglass safely cradled in her arms, she stepped through the little door and into a world that felt like a dream. The garden was vast, impossibly vast, far larger than the shop could have ever contained. Paths of smooth, moss-covered stones wound through beds of strange and wondrous flowers. Some glowed faintly with silver light. Others swayed even though there was no breeze. Ancient trees arched above like cathedral ceilings, their branches heavy with ticking fruit, tiny clocks instead of apples. At the center of the garden stood a sundial, but it cast no shadow. "What is this place?" Elodie asked in awe. Bellamy joined her beneath a flowering archway. "This is the watchmaker's garden, a place where time grows." He knelt beside a small patch of earth where a delicate blue flower pulsed softly. "This," he said, "is a forget-me-not of true time. Each one grows from a memory someone thought they lost forever. When it blooms, the memory is safe again." Elodie looked around. The whole garden felt alive with remembrance. Soft laughter echoed from the leaves. Distant lullabies shimmered in the petals. Suddenly, the hourglass in her arms grew warm. The sand inside danced, rising into the air like mist. One glowing grain floated out and drifted toward a quiet corner of the garden. She followed. There, tucked between two stones, bloomed a single white rose. As the grain of memory touched its petals, the flower glowed, and Elodie remembered. It was her father. He had once knelt beside her, years ago, in their tiny garden outside the city. He taught her how to plant seeds gently, with hope and care. "Time," he had said, "is like a garden. You don't rush it. You tend it." Tears welled up, not from sadness, but from the sweet weight of love rediscovered. Bellamy stood quietly nearby. "You've found your first root," he said. She turned. "What do I do with it?" "You visit it," he said gently. "You water it with thought, with kindness, with slowness." As they walked back through the garden, tiny clock blooms turned to face her like sunflowers. The garden, it seemed, now knew her. Back in the shop, Elodie set the hourglass down beside a clock shaped like a moon. Bellamy handed her a small notebook, its cover soft like worn leather. "What's this?" she asked. "Your timekeeper's journal," he said. "A place to plant words for every moment you'd like to remember, or understand, or hold." She opened the first page. Blank, and brimming with possibility. The clocks ticked on. Outside, night folded over the town like a gentle quilt. And somewhere in the garden, beneath stars and dreams, another flower began to bloom. The clock above Bellevue's town hall struck midnight with a gentle chime. 12 soft notes that drifted like dandelion seeds across the rooftops. While most of the town slumbered, Elodie sat curled in the corner of the clock shop, her new timekeeper's journal resting in her lap. Bellamy looked up from his workbench. "Do you hear it?" She paused, listening. Far off, so faint that it might have been imagination, came the sound of pages turning, and a door creaking open. Bellamy smiled. "The library is awake." Elodie's eyes widened. "A library?" "The library of hours," he said, rising and taking an old brass key from a drawer. "It opens only at midnight and only for those who carry time carefully." She followed him out the back door, past the watchmaker's garden now resting in starlight. Beyond a small grove of sleeping trees stood a stone building she'd never seen before. Ivy grew up its sides, and the moonlight shimmered against its tall arched windows. Its door was carved with a sun, a moon, and an hourglass. Bellamy inserted the key. The door sighed open. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of ink and old rain. Thousands of books lined the shelves, some tall as towers, others no larger than a button. Golden lanterns floated gently above, casting soft halos of light. Time, here, was hushed. tender, sacred. Each book had a title handwritten in silver ink. The moment you first saw the sea, the day you stood up for a friend, the afternoon you almost forgot, all the times you watched the sky. Elodie walked slowly through the aisles, her fingers brushing the spines. She felt a warmth each time her hand hovered over a certain volume, like being seen by something ancient and kind. She pulled out one book. It opened itself. Inside were drawings, smells, sounds, not just words, but the entire memory. She was a child again, watching the first snowfall of her life. She remembered the silence, the surprise, the way her mother had held her hand. She closed the book and held it close. Bellamy sat at a table nearby. "This is where timekeepers learn to listen," he said softly. "To what was, and what is, and what still might be." "Can I write a book of my own?" she asked. "You already are," he said with a wink. She took her journal and, with a silver pen that shimmered like moonlight, began writing. "Tonight I walked through time. Not the ticking kind, but the kind that grows like trees, and opens like flowers, and remembers me back." When she looked up again, Bellamy was gone. But the clock still ticked. The book still whispered. And she was not afraid. In that quiet, hallowed place, Elodie read stories until her eyelids grew heavy. She curled into a velvet armchair beneath the lanterns, and as she drifted into dreams, the books gently closed themselves, their covers rising and falling like sleeping breaths. Outside, the moon watched over her like an old friend, and the night, ever patient, ever kind, turned one more quiet page. The sun peeked through the clouds with a gentle yawn the next morning, casting golden fingers across the rooftops of Bellevue. Elodie awoke still nestled in the velvet armchair of the Library of Hours, the soft rustle of pages whispering good morning. She rubbed her eyes. The floating lanterns had dimmed with the dawn, and the door behind her, the one she had entered through at midnight, was now gone. Instead, in its place, stood a tall wooden staircase leading up and up and up. Pinned to the first step was a note in Bellamy's looping handwriting. "One who has listened may now guide. The lighthouse awaits." Elodie's feet made no sound as she ascended the staircase. It wound through starlit air, past floating hourglasses and drifting memories that shimmered like soap bubbles. With every step, the view of Bellevue grew smaller, the town below now looking like a painting framed by sky. At last, she emerged onto a wide, round platform surrounded by tall glass windows. It was the top of a lighthouse, but not just any lighthouse. This one was made of time. Its walls shimmered faintly with moments long gone, dances, laughter, quiet tears, all gently spinning like constellations. In the center stood a great glowing lens, shaped like a clock face, casting beams of soft, golden light across the sea of sky. Bellamy stood beside it, adjusting dials carved from moonstone. "You're early," he said, glancing at Elodie with a smile. "I didn't want to miss anything." He nodded. "That's good. Because this lighthouse doesn't guide ships. It guides hearts." She tilted her head. "How?" Bellamy turned a small gear, and the lens shifted direction. The golden beam drifted across the clouds until it touched a cottage by a stream far away. Through the glass, Elodie saw an old woman sitting alone, staring out the window with tired eyes. "She lost something," Elodie whispered. "Yes," Bellamy said softly. "But watch." The light touched the cottage gently, like a hand resting on a shoulder. The old woman blinked. Then she smiled. Slowly, she got up and opened a drawer. She took out an old music box and wound it, its melody rising faintly into the sky. A memory returned to her, and she danced. Elodie watched, wide-eyed. "It helps people remember." "Not just remember," Bellamy said. "It helps them feel what time has made quiet. This lighthouse reminds them that every moment they've lived still belongs to them." He turned to her. "One day, this will be yours." Elodie looked around, at the shimmering walls, the soft glow of the lens, the infinite horizon of hearts to reach. A quiet warmth filled her chest. "Will I know what to shine on?" "You'll feel it. Just like you felt the books in the library." He handed her a small pocket watch with a sun on one side and a moon on the other. "When this glows, it's time to shine." She closed her fingers around it and felt a hum, not from the watch, but from the space around her. A knowing, a peace. Then, as gently as she had come, she was back in the clock shop, the smell of wood and oil greeting her like an old friend. The time was still early morning, the world quiet and expectant. She opened her journal and wrote, "Today I held the light that knows the way, and I am learning to follow it too." Outside, the bells of Bellevue chimed, not loudly, but with just enough warmth to say, "You're on your way." And above, far above, the timekeeper's lighthouse turned once more, steady and kind, casting golden dreams across the waking world. The following day was wrapped in a soft fog, like the sky had decided to put on a silken scarf. In Bellevue, the fog was never frightening. It was gentle, like the hush before a lullaby. Elodie wandered through the morning mist with Bellamy's pocket watch tucked safely in her coat. It was glowing faintly, a golden warmth pressing against her chest like a whisper from the stars. She followed it. Through winding cobbled alleys, past the florist's sleepy shutters and the pastry shops still dusted with flower dreams, she walked. Eventually, the fog gave way to a clearing, a hidden grove she had never noticed before. The ground here was carpeted in soft moss, and the trees, oh, the trees! Each one was tall and elegant, their trunks carved with spiraling symbols. Instead of fruit, delicate hourglasses hung from the branches, glowing with inner light. Some were golden, others a pale blue, and a few shimmered with colors Elodie couldn't name. A wooden sign, tilted gently to one side, read, "The Orchard of Borrowed Time." She stepped gently beneath the canopy. The hourglasses didn't tick loudly, they pulsed softly, in time with the wind. Each one held a moment, a child's giggle, a whispered apology, a brave decision, a quiet afternoon of reading by the fire. She reached for one shaped like a teardrop. As her fingers brushed the glass, the world around her shimmered. Suddenly, she was standing in the middle of a warm summer field. A little boy, no more than 6, was building a kite with his father. The kite looked like a dragon made of newspaper and thread. The boy laughed as it soared into the sky. Then, as gently as it had come, the vision faded. She was back in the orchard, breath caught in her throat. A figure stepped from behind a willow tree. She was elderly, with silver hair in a long braid and a cloak woven with the colors of dawn. "Welcome, Melody," she said. "You know me?" The woman smiled. "Everyone who enters this grove is known. You are a keeper of moments now. This orchard grows from the memories people almost forget." Elodie looked around. "Why are they here?" "Because not all moments wish to be remembered right away. Some choose to wait, to ripen like fruit until someone is ready to hold them again." The woman led her to a small tree, no taller than Elodie herself. It had only 3 hourglasses, small, pale green ones. "These are yours," she said gently. Elodie blinked. "Mine?" "Your own memories. The quiet ones. The ones you may have set aside to make space for others." Elodie reached out and touched the middle one. She was in a field of lavender, running through the rows as her grandmother's laughter echoed behind her. The sky was pink with dusk, and a butterfly danced on her fingertip. When she returned to the orchard, she was crying softly, not from sadness, but from the beauty of remembering. The woman gave her a small satchel made of star cloth. "When the time comes, you may plant a moment of your own. It will grow here, safe among the others." Elodie bowed her head in gratitude, the satchel clutched close. As she left the orchard, the fog parted to reveal Bellevue once more, shining with gentle light. The people she passed looked the same, but Elodie saw something new in their eyes. A glimmer of stories not yet told, of time held in gentle hands, of hearts still learning how to remember. That night, as she sat by her window, she whispered to the stars, "I will carry your moments with care, for I now know the shape of time, and how softly it can bloom." And the orchard of borrowed time swayed in the night wind, cradling all that was quiet and waiting and loved. The moon was full the next night. Casting a silvery hush across the rooftops of Bellevue. Elodie had fallen asleep with Bellamy's pocket watch resting beside her pillow. Its soft ticking had become part of her dreams now, like a lullaby from the stars. But this evening, the watch didn't tick. It hummed. A gentle vibration stirred Elodie from slumber. The hands of the watch spun slowly backward, then forward, then paused, pointing to a tiny inscription she had never noticed before. Rue des Sauhates Oublis, Street of Forgotten Wishes. Wrapped in a woolen shawl and curiosity, Elodie slipped into the night. The air was cool and tender, like a sigh. The streets of Bellevue were quiet, yet not empty. The lamplights flickered with awareness, as if they were watching her with soft, golden eyes. At the end of a winding cobblestone path, Elodie found it. An iron gate curled like a question mark, opening into a moonlit square. In the center stood a carousel. But this was no ordinary carousel. Instead of horses, there were dreamlike figures mounted on poles, a glass swan with wings of mist, a lion made of stardust and sleep, a ship floating on invisible seas. Each one shimmered faintly, as though breathing the memories of those who had once ridden them. A painted sign arched above. La Carousel de Sauhate Sublis, the carousel of forgotten wishes. Open only to those who remember to forget. A voice broke the silence. It spins only for those with a quiet heart. Elodie turned to see an old man seated on a bench, his eyes like deep wells of time. He wore a conductor's cap and a coat that sparkled like frost. At his side sat a music box, turning slowly without being touched. "Do you wish to ride?" he asked. "I think I do," Elodie whispered. "But I'm not sure what I've forgotten." "That's the best kind of wish," the old man smiled. "Climb aboard. The carousel remembers for you." Elodie chose the swan. As she placed her hands on its misty feathers, the world tilted, not dizzyingly, but gently, like falling into a warm nap. The carousel began to turn, slow and graceful. A music only she could hear filled the air, the sound of old lullabies, the breeze through lavender fields, the hush of unread books. With each turn, a memory stirred. A birthday candle that never blew out. A kite that flew too high. A letter she once wrote and never sent. Then, a softer memory bloomed, so faint it had become nearly weightless. She was 5, sitting beneath the kitchen table, building castles out of sugar cubes. Her father had just come home, placing his coat over a chair and kneeling to help her build towers. He had whispered, "One day you'll build bigger castles out in the world." Elodie had forgotten, but the carousel hadn't. When the ride slowed to a stop, the swan's eyes sparkled with quiet joy. Elodie slid gently to the ground, heart full. The old man stood and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a folded paper crown made of sugar packet wrappers. "You dropped this," he said with a wink. Tears glistened in Elodie's eyes. "I didn't even remember I had it." "Ah," said the man, tipping his cap. "That's why the carousel keeps turning, to hold on to the dreams we're too busy to carry." Elodie walked home slowly, cradling the paper crown as if it were made of gold. The carousel spun behind her, fading into fog once more, waiting for the next gentle heart. And high above, the stars hummed quietly, a lullaby only the carousel riders could hear. The next morning in Bellevue arrived gently, wearing a robe of lilac mist and the scent of warm bread. Elodie awoke to the quiet ticking of Bellamy's watch once more, steady, soft, and no longer humming. The paper crown still lay beside her on the nightstand, as delicate and powerful as a secret promise. As she sipped her morning tea, a soft knock tapped at the front door. It was Madame Rosette, the florist from across the street, holding a bundle of peach-colored peonies. "For you," she said warmly. "They bloomed overnight. Strange this time of year." Elodie accepted the flowers with wonder. "Thank you. They feel familiar." Dreams have roots, too. Rosette smiled cryptically. They bloom when we least expect. That afternoon, as clouds floated lazily like cream over the rooftops, Elodie wandered toward the antique market tucked in the back alley of Rue du Voleur. It was a quiet place, where clocks didn't always tick and mirrors sometimes whispered. She browsed slowly, past velvet gloves, music boxes, porcelain owls, and tiny perfume bottles that still held memories of long-forgotten evenings. And then she saw it. A mirror, framed in soft gold leaf, tarnished with kindness. The glass shimmered not with reflection, but with something else, as though fogged by breath on a cold day, revealing glimpses of dreams not yet lived. A small card rested below. Le Miroir de Demains Doux, the mirror of soft tomorrows, for those who've remembered yesterday and made peace with today. Elodie's hand reached out, fingertips brushing the edge. The mirror sighed, a sound like silk being folded. Her reflection was there, but different. She saw herself standing in a sun-drenched meadow, sketching wildflowers in a leather-bound notebook. Children were laughing nearby. A table was set under a tree, with friends gathered for an endless picnic. Bellamy's watch was still on her wrist, but its ticking had stopped, resting peacefully. The version of herself in the mirror smiled, not because everything had gone as planned, but because she had begun to trust the softness of time. She stepped back. Tears welled gently. The kind of tears that didn't fall from sadness, but from recognition, from the soul sighing. Yes, I know this. The market stall was empty when she turned to speak to the seller. Only the mirror remained, along with a small folded note tucked into the frame. It read, "Tomorrow is made from the quiet choices of today. You are choosing gently. Keep going." She carried the mirror home, wrapped in a wool scarf, and placed it near the window where the morning light would kiss it every day. That evening, as the town of Bellevue folded itself into sleep, Elodie lit a candle and wrote in her journal, "Today I saw who I might become." She was quiet, kind, and full of ordinary joy. I think I'm already a little bit her. Perhaps that's enough for now. She tucked the paper crown into the drawer, beside Bellamy's watch and the folded note. The mirror glowed softly in the corner. Outside, the wind danced gently through the lavender hedges, whispering lullabies to the rooftops. And in the quiet stillness of night, a carousel turned slowly somewhere unseen, and a mirror waited patiently for the next visitor. By now, Elodie had grown familiar with the rhythm of Bellevue's dreams, the way the cobblestones whispered underfoot, how the shutters blinked open like sleepy eyes in the morning, and how the sky always wore soft colors like watercolors on old linen. It was during one such rainy afternoon, gentle rain, not the kind that demanded an umbrella but the kind that made you slow your steps, that she noticed something peculiar. A narrow side street that had never been there before. She paused. There, between the apothecary and the paper shop, nestled in ivy, stood a little arched alleyway framed by mossy stones. At its entrance was a small wooden sign, barely legible in the drizzle. La Maison du Curtend, the tea house that waited for you. She hesitated only a moment, then stepped inside. The alleyway curved slightly, like a whispered secret, until it opened into a small courtyard that seemed untouched by time. There stood the tea house, a tiny stone building with blue shutters and a crooked chimney puffing a spiral of steam-scented air. Its door creaked open before she could knock. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with bergamot and honey. There was no one at the counter. Only a small handwritten menu that read, "1 pot of tea brewed with memories. 1 hour of peace. 1 story just for you." Elodie sat at the corner table. The chair was soft, the cushions warm with kindness. A porcelain teapot appeared as if by magic, steaming gently. Its label, "Reconfort, comfort." She poured herself a cup. The taste was soft, like chamomile, but with something else, the memory of a mother's voice humming in another room. The weight of a blanket on a rainy morning, the scent of lilacs after a storm. A notebook lay on the table. Curious, she opened it. Inside, page after page of journal entries, all signed by different names. Each one told the story of someone who had found the tea house. Each entry ended the same way. "Thank you for waiting." Elodie added her own. "Today, I found peace without asking. I didn't chase it. I simply turned the corner and there it was. Warm, waiting, and enough." She closed the notebook and rested her head on the table for a while, eyes half closed, listening to the soft tapping of rain on the windows and the hush of quiet music playing from nowhere and everywhere. When she finally stood to leave, she noticed something by the door, a tiny package wrapped in craft paper with her name written in fountain pen. Inside, a miniature silver spoon engraved with the word, "Toujours, always." She left the tea house feeling lighter. The alleyway behind her shimmered gently in the mist, and when she turned to look one last time, it was gone. But the spoon remained in her pocket. So did the warmth. So did the knowing that sometimes comfort waits in corners we don't know to look, and that a cup of tea can hold the softest parts of the soul. On a cool, starlit evening in early spring, when Étoile Street shimmered under a silver glaze of moonlight, something peculiar happened. Just as Monsieur Henri closed his shutters for the night, a soft, melancholic tune floated through the air, a lilting accordion melody that drifted from somewhere near the river. Henri paused. He hadn't heard music like that in years. It wasn't from a radio or any modern speaker. It was real, raw and fragile, like something from a dream. He stepped out into the cobbled street, following the sound. At the edge of the old stone bridge, standing in the moon's glow, was a young man in a weathered coat. He held a red and black accordion, playing with closed eyes and a gentle sway. The notes he played seemed to speak of long journeys, lost lovers, and hopeful dawns. Henri didn't say a word. He simply stood and listened, as did others who slowly appeared from their homes, wrapped in shawls and sleepiness. For a few minutes, all of Étoile Street stood still, mesmerized, silent, and united under the soft light and song. When the piece ended, the accordionist opened his eyes, smiled faintly, and gave a small bow. Someone clapped. Then another. Soon, the quiet night was filled with gentle applause. Henri approached him. "You play beautifully," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm just a traveler," the young man replied. "But when the moon is this full, I must play." "Do you do this often?" Henri asked, genuinely curious. "Only when I'm passing through a town that feels like it remembers," he said cryptically. "And this street, it remembers many things." Henri chuckled. "That it does." The accordionist looked at the moon, then back at Henri. "Would you like to learn?" he asked. "Not just to play notes, but to play memories." Henri blinked. He was a clockmaker, used to gears and precision, not improvisation and rhythm. But something about this question tugged at his soul. Perhaps he had grown weary of only measuring time. Perhaps, now, he wanted to make it sing. "Yes," Henri said quietly, "I would." And so, under the sleepy watch of the moon and the whispers of lavender trees, Monsieur Henri took his first lesson in music. The accordionist taught not with scales and drills, but with stories, tales woven into melodies that Henri echoed back, slowly and imperfectly, but with heart. That night, Étoile Street didn't sleep as early as usual. The houses glowed longer, and laughter and soft music spilled into the alleys. It was a night the town would remember, not just because of the music, but because it marked the moment a clockmaker began to hear time differently. After that moonlit evening of music and memory, something subtly shifted in Monsieur Henri. He still wound clocks, still tended to delicate gears and chiming pendulums, but now there was a softness to his silence, a rhythm in his fingers, as though music had made a home within him. It was in the quiet of his shop. On a particularly misty Tuesday morning, that Henri noticed a peculiar pocket watch on his workbench. It was one he'd repaired months ago, belonging to an elderly bookseller from across town. Yet now it ticked with an unfamiliar pulse, gentle, restless, as if dreaming. He leaned in and listened. Tick, tick, flutter. The sound was unmistakable. Not a mechanical slip or fault in the spring, but a gentle fluttering, like wings. Henri opened the casing and found, engraved on the inner lid, an inscription he had never noticed before. To see time not as it passes, but as it flies. He blinked. That evening, unable to resist curiosity, Henri took the watch to the river bank where the accordionist had once stood. He opened it beneath the stars, and to his astonishment, the hands of the watch began to spin, not wildly, but gracefully, like a bird taking flight. The air shimmered softly around him. And then he saw it. A tiny vision, faint, ephemeral, of the past. A boy, perhaps 12, sitting beside the river's edge, carving a small wooden glider. He laughed as it caught the breeze and soared a few feet before landing in the reeds. Henri gasped. The boy was himself. A memory he had forgotten. The next night he returned, this time with the accordionist's melody humming quietly in his chest. He opened the watch again, and again, a vision unfurled. His mother humming a lullaby in the kitchen, the smell of warm bread in the air, a summer long since gone. Each evening brought another memory. The watch, it seemed, was not for telling time but for traveling through it. Not in the way of machines or science fiction, but through feeling, scent, sound, through heart. Henri began writing them down, the moments the watch revealed. He called them flights, small journeys into the forgotten corners of his own life. And with each one, he found a tenderness he hadn't known he'd lost. Soon, he crafted a small display in his shop, the watch that dreamed of flight. It sat in a glass dome, gently ticking, waiting for someone who needed to remember something beautiful. And people came. A widow searching for the scent of her husband's old cologne. A baker who had forgotten the taste of her grandmother's vanilla. A child who missed a smile they couldn't quite describe. Each time, Henri opened the watch. And each time, it flew, not far, not long, but just enough to bring a little peace. Word of the watch that dreamed of flight spread quietly through the cobbled streets of Montville, not like a rumor but like the scent of something just baked, warm, nostalgic, and irresistible. Strangers began appearing at Henri's door not for repairs, but for a moment of remembering. Henri welcomed them all, gently, with no questions and no promises. Just the soft ticking of the mysterious watch and a chair by the window. And then one afternoon, something unusual happened. A young woman arrived, not with a watch or memory, but with a bundle of old letters tied in a faded blue ribbon. She introduced herself only as Elise. "I found these in the attic of my grandmother's house," she said, her voice like the edge of paper, thin and trembling. "But they're not addressed to anyone. Just signed with an initial. H." Henri blinked. He untied the ribbon carefully and opened the first letter. His hands paused. The handwriting was his own. Elise tilted her head. "I think they're from you." Henri stared at the page, the ink faded and sweetly smudged by time. He began to read aloud. The letters spoke of the sea, of longing, of a town where the bells chimed like laughter and the lavender bloomed into the sky. A place that sounded like Montville, yet written as though seen from far away. "I don't remember writing these," he whispered. There were 17 letters in all, each one more poetic than the last. Notes not a fact, but a feeling. Dreams, maybe? Or hopes he had once hidden so deeply they had become someone else's story. Elise smiled gently. "My grandmother's name was Helene." Henri's breath caught. "I think you wrote to her," she said softly. "And I think she kept them her whole life." Silence settled like dusk. Henri picked up the watch, opened it, and let it tick. The vision that came was different, longer, clearer. He saw himself as a young man, sitting under the sycamore tree beside Étoile Street, scribbling on paper with fierce, bright longing. Across from him sat a young woman with a scarf in her hair and laughter in her eyes. Helene. He remembered her now, not all at once, but like music returning after the wind has passed. He looked at Elise and felt tears well, not of sorrow, but of something fuller, recognition, perhaps, or quiet gratitude. That night, Henri took down the display and placed the letters beside the watch under the dome. He changed the sign to read, "For memories not lost, but waiting." And Montville sighed, as though something very small but very important had been returned. The rain in Montville had a rhythm all its own, a quiet percussion that turned the cobblestones dark and glossy, that filled the gutters with whispered melodies. On such a rainy morning, Henri did what he always did. He opened the shop precisely at 10, set the kettle to boil, and dusted off the display cabinet where the watch that dreamed of flight now lay beside the bundle of old letters. But today, someone else stood outside, waiting. It was a man in a pale gray coat, wearing a hat that had seen better days. He was holding something wrapped in a linen handkerchief, carefully, as if it were a fragile bird. Henri opened the door with a nod. The man stepped in, shook off the mist, and unwrapped his parcel. Inside lay an old music box, scratched and silent. "I used to play it at my cafe," the man said. Before I forgot the tune." Henri looked up. "Forgot?" The man smiled sadly. "I remember the feeling, not the notes. Customers said it made the coffee taste sweeter. My wife said it helped her sleep. But when she passed, the melody left me too." He pushed the music box across the counter. "I don't expect it to work again. I just wanted to hear what it felt like." Henri cradled the music box in his hands. There was a subtle warmth in it, as though it had been holding the memory quietly all this time. "I can try," he said gently. He opened the lid. The mechanism inside was worn, a few teeth missing from the cylinder, the comb bent like tired fingers. But Henri didn't rush. He worked with the quiet patience that had earned him the town's trust, bending the comb's prongs delicately, oiling the spindle, winding the key just once. When the music box began to play, it was hesitant at first, soft and halting, like a voice unsure of its own strength. But the tune emerged, a lilting, bittersweet waltz with notes that seemed to shimmer between each raindrop. The man's eyes filled. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the song." Henri didn't speak. He simply watched as something in the man's posture softened, like a weight had shifted ever so slightly from one side to the other. He took a seat by the window, the music playing between them like a third presence. Later, when the rain eased and the man prepared to leave, he left the music box behind. "Let it stay here," he said. "It belongs with the others." Henri nodded. He placed the box next to the watch and letters, arranging them like chapters in a story only time could tell. That night, Henri dreamed of a small cafe tucked between lavender hedges, where a gentle tune played from behind the counter and laughter stirred in porcelain cups. He did not know if it was the past or the future, only that it was real. And outside, Montville slept beneath its rain-slick rooftops, humming softly to a song it thought it had forgotten. The morning after the music box came to life, Henri awoke with a curious lightness in his chest. Outside, the streets of Montville glistened with the aftermath of rain, and the air was cool, tinged faintly with the scent of blooming jasmine from a nearby garden. As he prepared for the day, Henri's thoughts lingered on the music box. Its melody, though fragile, seemed to have breathed new warmth into the quiet corners of his shop. He wondered what other forgotten stories might be waiting to be heard. Stepping out, Henri walked along Étoile Street, the cobblestones still damp beneath his feet. The town was beginning to stir. Shutters opening, and the soft murmur of morning greetings rising in the air. Ahead, a soft glow caught his eye. A cluster of lanterns hung across the narrow street, their delicate flames flickering in the gentle breeze. But there was something unusual. These lanterns whispered, not in words, but in gentle sighs and almost imperceptible hums, like the quiet breathing of the night itself, reluctant to fully surrender to dawn. Henri paused, entranced. Approaching one lantern, he reached out tentatively. The glass was warm, and inside, the flame danced as if alive, casting tiny shadows that seemed to flicker into shapes, fleeting images of people long gone, laughter echoing in the glow. An old woman appeared nearby, leaning on a cane, her eyes twinkling. "Those lanterns," she said softly, "are memories given light. They hold the whispers of Montville's nights, the hopes, dreams, and sometimes regrets of those who once walked these streets." Henri smiled. "They feel alive." "They are," she nodded. "Each flame a story, a heart, a moment saved from fading into silence." He looked back to his shop, to the music box and the watch, now companions in a silent collection of time and memory. That evening, as dusk settled and the lantern's whispers grew louder, Henri lit a small candle on his workbench, letting its gentle flame mingle with the stories held within his hands. And in that soft, quiet light, the past and present seemed to blend, a tapestry of moments stitched together by time, memory, and the gentle art of keeping stories alive. Montville slept again, cradled in whispers and candlelight, waiting for the next tale to unfold. The following days brought a gentle calm over Montville. The whispering lanterns had become a nightly ritual, their soft murmurs a comforting lullaby to the town's residents. Henri found himself drawn to them more often, feeling a deepening connection to the memories they held. One rainy afternoon, as the sky poured a steady silver over the rooftops, Henri's attention was captured by a peculiar package left at his door. Wrapped in faded parchment and tied with a thin silk ribbon, it bore no sender's name, only a faint impression of a crescent moon. Inside, Henri discovered a delicate timepiece, unlike any he had seen before. Its casing was made of polished obsidian, smooth and cool to the touch, yet the glass face shimmered with an ethereal glow, as if lit by a light from within. Curious, Henri wound the small knob. But instead of ticking, the watch remained silent. No hands moved, no sound stirred the stillness. It was a silent timepiece, frozen in a moment beyond time itself. Yet as Henri held it close, a strange warmth spread through his fingers, and faint images began to flicker within the glass, not of Montville, but of distant lands, starry skies, and silent forests. He realized this watch was not meant to measure ordinary time. It was a keeper of quiet moments, the breath before a storm, the pause between heartbeats, the stillness of dreams waiting to be remembered. That night, Henri placed the silent timepiece beside his candle. The gentle flame cast dancing shadows over its surface, and as he drifted to sleep, he felt the calm embrace of all those frozen moments, softly cradling him into peaceful rest. Montville, wrapped in night's gentle silence, waited patiently for time's next quiet whisper to be heard. The days grew longer as spring edged closer, yet the mystery of the silent timepiece lingered in Henri's thoughts like a gentle melody he could not forget. Each evening, after closing his shop, he would hold the watch in his hand and watch the faint images ripple within its glass face. One evening, as a pale moon rose over Montville, Henri noticed something new. The timepiece began to emit a soft, rhythmic glow, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Curious and hopeful, he whispered a quiet wish, to glimpse the stories held within. Suddenly, the watch's glow brightened, and the images sharpened into vivid scenes. Henri saw a child laughing beneath blossoming trees, an old woman knitting by a fire, a pair of lovers exchanging letters under a starry sky. These were moments lost to time, forgotten by many, yet preserved here in this silent guardian. Henri understood then. The watch was more than a timekeeper. It was a vessel for memories, a protector of life's gentle, quiet moments. Inspired, he decided to share this gift with Montville. He crafted a small box and placed the silent timepiece inside, inviting the townsfolk to leave their own memories, whispers, and dreams. And as the box filled, Henri could almost hear the echoes of time weaving a tapestry of lives, each thread shimmering softly beneath the moonlit sky. That night, as the town slept, the watch's glow bathed the streets in a warm, peaceful light, a reminder that even the quietest moments are worth holding close. Days passed, and the box of memories in Henri's shop grew heavier with each new offering. Letters, small trinkets, pressed flowers, and folded photographs filled the delicate container, each a story frozen in time. The townsfolk spoke softly of the magic within the shop, their voices like whispers carried on a gentle breeze. Henri found himself visited by many, young and old, who came seeking comfort, sharing fragments of their lives. An elderly man brought a faded photograph of his childhood home. A young girl left a pressed violet from her first day at school. Each memory was a thread, weaving the heart of Montville into a living quilt of love and loss. One quiet evening, Henri sat by his window, watching the lavender hues of dusk settle over the cobblestones. The watch's glow pulsed gently beside him, syncing with the rhythm of the town's heartbeat. In that peaceful moment, Henri realized that time was not just measured by ticking hands, but by the depth of moments lived and shared. The watch had taught him to cherish the present, to listen to the stories carried in the silence between seconds. As he closed his eyes, a soft breeze fluttered the curtains, carrying with it the scent of blooming jasmine and distant laughter. The echoes of time sang a lullaby, inviting all who heard to rest and dream, wrapped in the gentle tides of memory. The days grew warmer, and Montville's gardens blossomed with colors that seemed to sing beneath the sun. Henri's shop remained a haven of calm, a place where memories found refuge and time felt less hurried. One morning, a delicate melody drifted through the open window. Henri looked up to see a young woman standing at the doorway, a small heart cradled in her arms. Her eyes sparkled like morning dew, and her smile was as soft as a lullaby. "I am Elise," she said gently. "I heard your shop holds the stories of time. I carry music that remembers what words cannot say." Henri nodded, inviting her inside. As she plucked the strings of her harp, the notes wove through the air like golden threads, binding moments of joy, sorrow, and hope into a tapestry of sound. Together, Henri and Elise discovered that memories could sing as well as speak. The watch on the table began to pulse in harmony with the harp's melody, its glow shifting through hues of blue and gold. Montville's nights became filled with soft music, a lullaby for the restless and the weary. The townspeople gathered beneath starlit skies to listen, feeling their hearts lighten and their dreams deepen. In the quiet harmony of shared stories and songs, Henri understood that time was a melody, ever-changing, yet forever gentle. As days passed, Henri and Elise's bond grew, intertwined with the music of time itself. One afternoon, while exploring a hidden drawer in an old wooden cabinet, Henri discovered a slender silver pendulum, delicate, yet gleaming with an inner light. Elise's eyes widened with recognition. "This," she whispered, "is said to be crafted by the original keeper of time here in Montville. It holds a secret, a way to glimpse moments lost forever." Curiosity and reverence filled the air as Henri carefully fitted the pendulum into the ancient clock standing tall in the corner. The clock's hands began to move with a new rhythm, steady and slow, as if awakening from a long slumber. With each swing of the pendulum, soft images flickered inside the clock's face. Glimpses of laughter under rain, a child's first steps, the quiet smile of an old friend. The memories seemed to flow like a gentle river, soothing and timeless. Elise played her harp, weaving her melodies around the glowing pendulum, and together they watched as forgotten moments danced in the twilight of the workshop. The magic of the silver pendulum reminded everyone that even the smallest moments shine brightly in the story of life. The gentle tick-tock of the silver pendulum filled the cozy workshop with a rhythm unlike any other. Henri and Elise sat side by side, their hearts swelling with a calm wonder as memories shimmered softly within the clock's glowing face. "Elise," Henri whispered, "do you think these are memories of people from Montville? Or perhaps from another time altogether?" Elise's fingers danced lightly over her harp strings, producing a melody as delicate as the moments unfolding before them. "Maybe both," she said. "Time is not just a line, but a tapestry. Every note, every second, woven together." As the pendulum swung, they saw a vision of a child chasing butterflies in a sun-drenched meadow, the soft laughter echoing through the air. Then, a quiet scene of an old couple sharing a gentle evening walk beneath twinkling stars. The magic of the pendulum didn't just reveal images. It awakened feelings, peace, joy, and the sweet melancholy of cherished memories. Henri felt his own memories gently rise, moments from his childhood, the warm embrace of his grandmother, the first snow falling softly outside his window. Elise leaned her head on Henri's shoulder, the harp song blending with the ticking clock, creating a lullaby of time itself. In that small workshop on Étoile Street, the past, present, and future seemed to meet in harmony, a perfect moment of stillness and peace. As the night deepened, the silver pendulum's glow softened, and Henri whispered, "Let's keep this melody alive, for everyone who needs to remember what truly matters." The night air outside was cool and fragrant with the scent of jasmine and lilac. Henri and Elise stepped quietly from the warm glow of the workshop into the calm silence of Étoile Street. The stars above twinkled softly, as if winking at a secret known only to them. "Elise," Henri murmured, "I've heard whispers of a hidden garden that blooms only at midnight." They say it holds the power to heal forgotten wounds and inspire lost dreams. Elise's eyes sparkled in the moonlight. A garden that thrives in darkness. It sounds like a place where time bends gently, like our clock's melody. Guided by a silver lantern, they walked past ancient stone walls and cobblestone paths lined with ivy. The street seemed different at night, more alive, yet serene, as if the world had slowed to breathe. At the edge of the village, behind a wrought iron gate covered in creeping vines, they found the entrance. The gate creaked open effortlessly, inviting them into the garden's embrace. Inside, the moonlight caressed flowers that shimmered with ethereal colors, deep blues, soft purples, and glowing whites. Each bloom seemed to pulse with quiet magic. Henri bent to touch a flower with petals like silk, and as his fingers brushed it, a wave of warmth and peace spread through him. Elise whispered, "This garden doesn't just grow flowers, it grows hope." They wandered slowly, their footsteps muffled by moss and fallen petals, feeling the garden's gentle power soothe their minds and hearts. In the center, a small stone bench invited them to sit. Henri closed his eyes, and the night sounds, the rustle of leaves, distant owl calls, a soft breeze, wrapped around them like a lullaby. "Here," Elise said softly, "time stands still. And in stillness, we find ourselves again." As they rested beneath the stars, the garden's magic wove a quiet spell of calm, weaving dreams of peace and gentle beginnings. As Henri and Elise rested on the cool stone bench, a soft breeze stirred the garden's petals, carrying a whisper, a voice as old as time itself. It was gentle yet clear, like a forgotten melody coming back to life. Henri opened his eyes slowly, feeling as though the garden was speaking directly to his heart. "Do you hear that, Elise? It's as if the garden remembers stories long past, stories waiting to be told again." Elise nodded, her gaze fixed on the shimmering flowers. "Maybe this garden holds the memories of all the moments lost between ticking clocks, the seconds forgotten, the quiet pauses in life's rhythm." Henri stood and walked toward an ancient sundial nestled among the blooms. The sundial's surface was covered in delicate engravings, symbols and numbers that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. With gentle hands, Henri traced the carvings. Suddenly, the air around them grew still, and the garden's colors deepened, wrapping them in a cocoon of serene silence. Time felt different here, softer, slower. It was as if the past and present were blending, allowing Henri and Elise to glimpse moments long vanished yet still alive beneath the surface. Elise whispered, "The garden doesn't just bloom at midnight. It blooms in the quiet spaces where time lingers, where memories are cherished and wounds begin to heal." Together they sat again beneath the stars, feeling the calm embrace of the garden's magic settle deeply into their souls. And as the first light of dawn began to soften the sky, they knew they had found a sanctuary, not only of flowers and moonlight but of time's gentle grace. As dawn's first light painted soft hues of pink and gold across the sky, Henri and Elise remained in the garden, still wrapped in the calm silence left by the night's magic. The air smelled sweet with the fragrance of jasmine and honeysuckle, and tiny birds began to stir, their gentle songs like a lullaby awakening the world. Henri gently touched a cluster of lavender, feeling the cool softness beneath his fingertips. This garden, it feels alive, Elise. More than just plants and flowers. Almost like it's singing its own secret song. Elise smiled, her eyes sparkling with wonder. Perhaps it does. I think every flower, every leaf, holds a memory, a note in the melody of time. They wandered slowly along the winding paths, the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet blending with the distant hum of the waking city. Each step seemed to echo with a quiet harmony, as if the garden was inviting them deeper into its timeless embrace. At the heart of the garden stood an ancient tree, its gnarled branches stretching toward the sky like the arms of a gentle giant. Hanging from its limbs were small glass orbs that caught the sunlight, scattering tiny rainbows across the ground. Henri reached up and gently touched one of the orbs, which shimmered with a warm, golden light. Suddenly, the garden seemed to come alive with a faint melody, a soft, soothing tune that wrapped around them like a gentle breeze. Elise closed her eyes and listened. It's beautiful. Like the garden is telling us its story, one of patience, hope, and quiet strength. Henri nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over him. This place reminds us that even when the world rushes by, there is always a space where time slows down, where we can simply be. Together, they sat beneath the ancient tree, letting the garden's secret song lull them into a peaceful rest. And as the music whispered through the leaves, Henri and Elise knew they had discovered something truly rare, a moment of pure tranquility, carried gently on the breeze. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting a warm amber glow across the cobblestone streets of Étoile, Henri and Elise found themselves wandering back toward the heart of the town. The garden's peaceful melody still lingered softly in their minds, like a comforting memory they wished to carry forever. Near the old marketplace, where the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the cool breeze, flickering lanterns began to appear. Small glass vessels hung from iron hooks along the streets, each glowing faintly as dusk approached. Elise, Henri said softly, have you ever noticed how lanterns seem to whisper stories when the night falls? As if each light holds a secret from long ago. Elise smiled, her eyes reflecting the lantern's gentle glow. I believe they do. They hold the memories of those who walked these streets before us, stories of love, laughter, and quiet moments like these. Drawn by curiosity, they followed the lantern-lit path toward the square where a small crowd had gathered, quietly listening to a soft, lilting voice. An old woman sat on a wooden bench, her hands weaving delicate patterns with thin threads of light, casting shimmering shadows on the walls. Henri and Elise settled nearby, enchanted by the way the lantern light danced, creating shapes that told stories without words. Each flicker seemed to speak of a moment in time, a child's first step, a lover's promise, a farewell wave at dawn. The old woman's voice was barely more than a whisper, yet it carried the weight of countless years. These lanterns, she said gently, are not just light in the dark. They are keepers of hope. Reminders that even when shadows fall, there is always a spark waiting to guide us home. Henri glanced at Elise, feeling the warmth of the lantern settle deep in his chest. In the quiet hum of that twilight moment, surrounded by soft light and whispered stories, They both understood the true magic of Étoile Street, a magic born not of grand events, but of gentle, unspoken connections that bind souls together across time. And as the night deepened, the lanterns glowed brighter, casting a soft embrace over the town, as if wrapping every heart in a tender, peaceful dream. As the lanterns cast their golden glow across the quiet town, Henri and Elise lingered in the square, reluctant to break the spell of the moment. The air was cool and gentle, filled with the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Henri's gaze drifted toward the old clock tower that stood sentinel over Étoile Street. Its face, weathered but steady, caught the lantern light and shimmered faintly. A sense of calm settled over him as he listened to the distant ticking, a steady heartbeat in the peaceful night. "Do you hear it, Elise?" Henri whispered. "The clock's song. It's almost like a melody, though no one ever hears it." Elise nodded, closing her eyes to better feel the rhythm. "Yes, it's a silent melody, a reminder that time moves gently, even when we aren't watching." Together, they walked slowly toward the tower, their footsteps soft on the cobblestones. As they approached, the clock's chimes began to ring out, not loud and brash, but soft and lilting, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. Henri thought about the countless moments the clock had witnessed: lovers' meetings, children's laughter, quiet nights like this one. It was a keeper of stories, much like the lanterns, quietly marking the passage of time while cradling the town's memories. Elise reached for Henri's hand, their fingers intertwining gently. "It's strange," she said, "how something as simple as a clock or a lantern can hold so much meaning." Henri smiled. "Maybe it's because they remind us to slow down, to notice the little things, the soft sounds, the warm lights, the gentle moments we often overlook." Together, beneath the silent melody of the clock tower and the whispering lanterns, they found a quiet peace that wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. In the stillness, the world seemed to pause, inviting them to dream softly and deeply. As the night grew darker, Henri and Elise stayed a little longer, savoring the calm and the beauty of Étoile Street, where time and light wove together to cradle their hearts in a gentle embrace.